Gold-minded records, they're not your friends.
Welcome to Horror Headquarters, a weekly horror podcast. I'm your host, Klive Kraven, with my lovely co-host,
Naya Banks.
We are here to bring you the best in all things horror. News, reviews, updates, interactive polls, discussions, interviews, and more. Stay tuned and stick around as we take on the horror genre. From the rotting graves of zombies to the blood-soaked fangs of vampires. From the claws of the werewolf to the vision of the apparition. Prepare for the slaughter orders. This is Horror Headquarters. We're just dying to talk horror. What is good, people? Welcome to episode 2 of Horror Headquarters. I am your host, Klive Kraven, with my lovely co-host.
It's Naya, bitch.
That's right, and we are here to talk with you guys about the Creepshow Trilogy. This is a very dope trilogy of flicks. It is anthology style. Obviously, there's a lot of people that aren't full-on fans of the whole franchise, understandably so. We will dive into that a little bit later. I got a lot of great things coming up with our Vital Organs to Stone breaking news on its way. We have the Netflix best picks this week. Obviously, Pick Your Poison, Body Count Reviews, Poll of the Week, and the results from last week's poll. So make sure you guys stick around. We have a whole lot that we're going to be getting into, so do not go nowhere. We are going to be filling your ear holes. Oh, yeah. Filling them with all kinds of horror knowledge, so don't go nowhere. We will be right back after this little break. This is Klive Kraven and
Naya Banks,
reporting live from Horror Headquarters. Our news department is making a killing to bring you the latest
Bone-breaking news.
Alright, people, we are back, and we have the bone-breaking news here for you. We have some interesting things to talk about tonight. We're going to go ahead and start it off with the first thing, which is Stranger Things Season 2. Yeah, available now on Netflix for live stream. I don't know why I said live stream. It's not exactly live, but for fucking stream, whatever. Eat a dick, Netflix. Anyway, so Stranger Things Season 2 just hit. We have watched the first episode.
Oh my god.
And it's good so far. I like a lot of the continuity that they've kept. Obviously, you have the same cast, the same theme. It's not done in a style like AHS or with Slasher, where each season is its own thing. It is a continual storyline, which I do like and do appreciate. So I am really looking forward to it. I don't want to give away any spoilers really on what we did watch in the first episode.
You just need to check it out. That's all we need to say.
Yeah, definitely make sure you check it out. It is good from what I've seen so far. We're probably going to dive into another episode later tonight, likely. But yeah, Stranger Things Season 2. It's on Netflix now. Make sure you check that out. Yeah, very dope.
And then speaking of Stranger Things, there are Beyond Stranger Things, which is like a behind-the-scenes type thing going on. So yeah, check that out as well. It's also on Netflix.
Yeah, the Beyond Stranger Things, that, I think, like you said, I think it's a behind-the-scenes, and I think it's specific to Season 2, which is why I have avoided it right now until we finish Season 2. But after we finish Season 2, it's something to get into to help hold us over till Season 3, which I'm pretty sure is going to happen. It better happen.
It has to happen.
It has
you can't just stop it right there and not continue. Like, I hate that.
Yeah, there's a huge popularity on Stranger Things, obviously. That's why it's spawned a spin-off documentary behind the scenes already on Netflix, and it being an original, obviously they're going to back it even more. So I do like the show. I'm looking forward to more coming from it. But yeah, Stranger Things and Beyond Stranger Things, both available now on Netflix. So make sure that you check those out.
Check it.
The next thing that I got here I want to talk about, this caught me out of left field, and I was really surprised by this. I wish I would have took note of the director who was involved with it, but I believe it was one of the cinematographers from the earlier Romero films. However, Road of the Dead is apparently in the works, and it's not directed by Romero, but is written by him, co-written by him and another gentleman. I cannot remember the guy's name. I should have took a note down of it. But he co-wrote this with Romero, and apparently it is in production right now. It has a very interesting storyline from what I've read. I'm interested in this movie mainly for the fact that I'm a huge Romero fan. Rest in peace to Romero, real legend of a director. And this, I'm hoping, is going to be a solid film. Obviously not directed by him, but written by him, and that for me is pretty dope. I'm definitely interested in seeing where they decide to take the franchise. Because it is, from what I understand, it is considered a next installment in the Romero Dead films. So, definitely interested to see where they decide to take Road of the Dead.
I know you guys know who Scream Factory is. If not, y'all need a wake-up call.
That's right.
The Gate 2, new movie by Scream Factory.
New release.
New release. I'm not really... I think I've seen some of their movies, right?
Yeah, Scream Factory basically re-releases major titles. I won't say major titles. They're titles that never really got quality Blu-rays or quality DVD releases, so they end up doing their own release of it, which typically they end up being great. I've got a couple. I've got Day of the Dead. I got The Burning and a couple other ones I picked up as well, but their releases are phenomenal. They typically come with a poster, a slipcover, reversible artwork, and phenomenal exclusive artwork to their company. So they aren't exactly a movie production company, more so as they are as a, I guess, I don't even know what you would call it, a company that just releases. They have releases, but it's not really their films. They're not helming these films. These are movies that have, they're remastering them and bringing quality versions of them to light, which is great because a lot of these films don't have quality releases. But yeah, The Gate 2 is an absolute classic. The Gate is one of my favorite movies, and I do love the sequel as well. So yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to that. So that's super dope. I have one more little tidbit here for the bone-breaking news this week, and that is the Blair Witch. Apparently there is a TV series coming soon based off of the Blair Witch. Now, I'm huge on this because I am from Maryland. I've been to Burkittsville. Me and my girlfriend both have stayed there. Me and I have both stayed at Burkittsville overnight. We had footage from it. It got erased, which is ironic. You know what I mean? Just a weird set of circumstances would go in there. We have some interesting pictures that we took with this white shadowy female figure that shows up in the background of one of the images. But super strange. Like, it's a really weird place to be. We actually camped right across from Coffin Rock, which, yeah, right. So that was just really creepy, but very interesting indeed. So yeah, I'm looking forward to this Blair Witch TV series. I'm not sure what they're gonna do with it or what direction they plan on taking it, but I am interested in it to check it out, and I will at least give it a chance. I'm not gonna talk shit, hate on it, or naysay it until I do give it a fair chance.
Yep.
So I think that about wraps up our bone-breaking news. We're going to keep things rolling. If you need to take a break, you need to stretch them legs out for a second, or you need to get yourself a snack and sandwich before we get into this major part of the show, go ahead, do that now. We're going to be right back in just a second.
And now, Our Headquarters presents your feature presentation, Vital Organs Discussion.
All right, we are back, and this is the beginning of our Vital Organs discussion.
Dun, dun, dun.
That's right. So this episode, obviously, we're focusing on Creepshow Trilogy. The Creepshow Trilogy, which is obviously 3 flicks, Creepshow 1, 2, and 3. All anthology films, and I have some notes here about the series in general that is pretty interesting. A lot of this stuff I did honestly not know, and it's dope to me because I'm a huge fan of this trilogy, and I do know quite a bit about it, and I learned a lot of shit prepping for this show and getting information jotted down. So some interesting things. So initially, we're going to start off with this well-known fact about it, but not a lot of heads may not know this if you're not a fluid horror fan, that the comics from the 1950s EC produced were the basis for this TV show, or for this series of films, which is really dope. I'm a huge fan of those old EC comic books, Weird Tales, Tales from the Crypt, Vault of Horror, all that stuff. Really cool books. So it's awesome to me that that is the origin and kind of birthplace of these films and what they based them on. I think that's super dope. Like I said, I am a huge fan of the comic books that they pulled these from, because the stories are great, the images are vivid, and the artwork is just phenomenal. The plots are just twisted, and they always had a comedic humor undertone to a lot of them as well, and very darkly done. I think the EC comic books are very cool, and it's awesome that they ended up basing, a lot of this stuff off of that. That's very cool to me.
Yep. Taurus Entertainment, who hold the rights to the original Creepshow, has licensed the rights to Jace Hall, who is the president of HD Films in Burbank, California, to produce Creepshow Raw, which is like a web series based upon the film.
Yeah, so that's pretty interesting. Now, we had actually talked about this and checked this film out. And it was pretty solid. It was an 8-minute short. It's on YouTube. We streamed it for free, and it was pretty solid. I mean, it's not the greatest, but there is a lot of awesome odes and nods to the original in there. You have the comic book intro, the comic book outro. Mm-hmm. You have the music that plays, homage to the John Harrison score from the original.
You have the twists like any other Creepshow have.
Yeah. A lot of those stories all have a great twist in them, and they definitely have that at the end of this one. It's not a flat out basic, monster story like they kind of portray it as. It has an awesome little twist at the end. So, for being a short film, especially a little 8-minute feature, it was definitely enjoyable. I liked it, and I thought that it was a cool little story, additionally standalone. I mean, the way I look at it is basically this Creepshow Raw was a standalone story from a Creepshow movie, is basically what it could have been. You could have took 5 or 6 of these, slapped them together, and made a Creepshow movie with a story wrapped around it, and it would have been, feasible to do. But unfortunately, I do not think that they ran it that long, and I think this actually only ran for a single episode, which is pretty unfortunate.
Yeah, so if you want to check that out, it is called Insomnia on YouTube, or
Creepshow Raw,
yeah,
Insomnia.
Creepshow Raw, Insomnia.
So the pilot episode for Creepshow Raw wrapped on July 30th, 2008, and the pilot was actually directed by Wilmer Valderrama and features Michael Madsen, the legendary Michael Madsen. So, you've got a pretty well-known director and star for this web series, which that's what surprises me so much, I guess, that it failed or was not, taken upon to go any further, because you have a big name franchise behind it, you have a big actor behind it, you have a big director behind it, or a bigger name. I'm not gonna say big, but a notable name. So it kind of surprised me that it ended up falling through, and it is quite unfortunate that it didn't end up becoming more than that. So.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I'd like to see more, because after that first episode, I was like, no, it can't be over.
Yeah, I think that it was a good one, and I enjoyed it myself, and like you said, I would like to see more of them, but unfortunately, it, airing back in 2008, it's been almost a decade since they've done another one, because they probably aren't going to do another one, so unfortunately, we have that one episode to linger on and wish that maybe one day there will be more. But I would love to see more, but I just have a feeling it's probably not going to happen anytime soon. And if it does happen, it'll probably be under a whole new premise. I have heard rumors possibly of a Creepshow remake, but that's never came to fruition either.
So, on the fun fact side of life, Creepshow is a graphic novel published by Penguin Imprint Plume in July 1982, based on the movie Creepshow, obviously, which was also released in 1982. The movie, directed by George Romero and written by Stephen King, consists of 5 short films, 2 of which are based on earlier prose stories by King, while the remaining 3 were written specifically for the movie.
Yeah, so that's pretty dope too. Like, these stories some of these had already pre-existed in King's earlier works, and then these other 3 were penned just for the film. So I'm not sure which ones were already in existence. I think it was, I want to say, Father's Day and Creeping Up on You. They're Creeping Up on You. I think those are the 2 that were already Stephen King short stories, but I'm not 100% sure, so don't quote me on that, because I very well could be wrong, but I think I remember somewhere reading that those were the 2 that were the short stories. But yeah, that's really cool. You know, that's dope that those stories actually came from earlier King works, and then there was some new specifically penned for the film itself. That is very cool to me. So another little fun fact here is Cat's Eyes and Tales from the Dark Side are considered loose sequels to the Creepshow franchise. Now, these films have such close ties because they are backed by Romero and King, and they have stories that are very similar and came out around a very similar time frame. And I even believe that one of the stories that was intended for Creepshow actually ended up on Cat's Eyes. I believe. Once again, I'm not 100% sure on that, but I also vaguely remember reading something about that one of the stories intended that ended up making it on another film. So that also is very cool. And both of those films are very, very fun anthology films. Cat's Eye and Tales from the Dark Side. So both of those definitely have the Creepshow vibe going for them 100%. And I could definitely see how they are considered sequels, and how some people would even bastardize the actual Creepshow 3 and say that's not a Creepshow, that should have been something else, and then these should have been the real predecessors to those films.
Yeah. So there's a documentary called Just Desserts, which is the making of the Creepshow movies, and it details the making of Stephen King and George Romero's 1982 horror anthology classic from conception through completion.
Yeah, that's actually really dope. We just watched that. Actually, once again, off of YouTube, the Just Desserts documentary. Now, I had heard about this previously because I believe Scream Factory actually released it as its own release, but I'd never seen it. So in preparation for this show, we both sat down and watched it. And yeah, there's a lot of cool information and knowledge in there. Some of the things I even speak on in the show that I didn't know about, that was, eye-opening to me, that was really cool, fun factoids from the film. So definitely highly recommend that. If you're a huge fan of the Creepshow franchise, I would check out the documentary, Just Desserts, The Making of Creepshow. Super well done. I've got interviews with Romero and Savini and several cast members, and, very cool. I will say, though, maybe it was just me, and yeah, maybe it is just me, but it seemed like Ed Harris was a bit of a dick.
Oh,
yeah. It seemed like he didn't like. He was like, it was a good film experience. I think it was okay for its time. Like, he didn't sound like it was a film that he's really proud of doing. You know what I mean?
Sound enthusiastic about it. Like,
yeah,
all the other actors and actresses who played parts, like, he sounded dull. Like,
yeah,
he was just like, oh.
Yeah, it was very bland for him. Like, it just didn't seem like he was very excited to be there doing the interview, which that kind of, like, I don't know, it kind of felt like it shouldn't have been in there, really. Like, it stands out. Like, his interview stands out as the only one of where it doesn't seem like he's genuinely interested to be there and be involved with the documentary. So, I don't know. I think they should have just fucking scrapped that whole interview, because it just doesn't. It stands out as being a different interview style kind of than the rest, because the vibe he puts off. But the documentary is well done, negating his pet parts. You know what I mean? It is very well done, and I did enjoy it. So definitely check that out. So here's another interesting fact. Instead of casting unknown characters in the original film, they decided to cast established actors who could fit the vibe that they wanted. So they said that a perfect example of this was getting Leslie Nielsen on board. Obviously, he was a very established actor and had a very specific vibe that he was known for. This was prior to his slapstick relief stuff of the 80s with Airplane and the Naked Gun movies and things like that. So he had a whole different style of acting at that point. He was known more as a serious actor, and that's why they casted him, because they wanted that serious role. They wanted that stone-faced type of acting, and they got that with Leslie Nielsen, although he was said to be quite a joker.
Yeah, even though he's serious, he has a comedic side, because what I remember him from was the Mr. Magoo movies. And
Yeah.
he cracked me up. So they did say they kept him up there too, because he brought like a smile to everybody's faces. Like, he knew when other people were down. Like, no, he had come on, cheer up.
Cheer it up.
Cheer up, Buttercup.
But yeah, he was definitely a great actor of his time and brought a lot to that role. So I thought it was cool, though, that they mentioned that they had gone for actors and actresses that were fitting to the vibes that they were trying to fill. They didn't necessarily cast people based on, well, this person is acting the role. They went out and found people that they felt fit the vibes for what they had already written. So that was kind of interesting to me, and they're also a very different way of approaching a film, because traditionally actors are trying to fit a mold of what they are versus being said, you fit this vibe, come play this role. So I think that's quite interesting in itself right there, for sure, without a doubt.
Well, I think it's also interesting too, because like, as an example, Adrienne Barbeau, they had her playing a drunken lady, but she in the interview she said she didn't drink, she didn't
yeah, she was completely sober.
Yeah.
And that alludes me once again to Trailer Park Boys with Jim Leahy, who's an actor who doesn't drink at all and plays it drunk, you know, religiously, and well done on a show, and you would never be able to tell, because it seems like he is a drinker, but he doesn't drink, and he just nails it. And the same thing with her, she really nailed that loud, obnoxious drunk chick, you know what I mean? She really nailed that role down and knocked it out of the park. Her performance in that film was definitely notable, and one of my favorite scream queens of that era, without a doubt, as well. So yeah, that was a super cool fact.
I definitely agree. On the creepy side of things, a real skeleton was used in the original film as the creep character. But on the bright side, he's the only character to appear in various versions of each film.
Yeah, that is pretty wild. He is the only character that you do see back in, over and over again, and his different iterations. In the first one, you have him as the skeleton, the Grim Reaper type of skeleton character. 2, he comes back as the animated creep, and as well as the truck driver. You know what I mean? Delivering the articles. And then you also have the third version, which is the guy who's working the hot dog stand, who it's revealed at the end that he's the creep. So 3 very different iterations of the classic creep character that is used throughout the films. But that's cool that they bring him back. It's kind of the Crypt Keeper type of vibe, that they have somebody hosting the stories, which I think is very dope. Even though in the third one he's not necessarily a host, he is still remembered and odied to in the third one. So I definitely think that's good.
He reminds me of the little bugger from the Tales of the Crypt.
Yeah, Crypt Keeper.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. Like, it definitely, it's the same kind of vibe. Like, you have a horror host kind of delivering these stories, like I said, with the exception of 3, because he doesn't really do that in the third one, but he is nodded to and alluded to, which is very cool.
Boom.
So this is pretty wild, and also with the creepy, weird, disgusting vibe to follow along with the previous one. Nathan's grave from the original film was dug on location of a local wealthy man's home. During filming, the man's German Shepherd had passed away, and he had the dog buried in the hole where the grave was from filming.
So they were filming on top of a dead German Shepherd.
The Sherman Shepherd. Shouts out to my dude Sherman Shepherd out there, bro.
Fuck off.
But no, it's seriously dope that, I mean, it's sad, poor dog, but it's dope that, like, a crazy story like that accompanies the film, because that grave was dug specifically just for the film. It wasn't in anticipation of anything, and then during filming the guy's dog passes. So what ironic, strange coincidence, and a bizarre incident for sure to even happen. But I thought that was pretty wild and definitely an interesting fact. And they touch on that in that documentary. I'd actually read this online, I believe on IMDb, but also they touch on this as well in the documentary. So very cool fact.
Who likes roaches? Not me. Okay. For the segment, they're creeping up on you. The crew had to designate a whole trailer just for the roaches, mainly for breeding, obviously, and they named it the Roach Motel. Obviously. Perfect name for it.
Yeah, it's super disgusting, but I guess it is kind of a necessity. You would have to have a way to store that many roaches that they had on the scene, which it is a staggering amount that they had, and we'll talk about that later. We touch on the details of that, but yeah, that's pretty funny, but also very wild. I don't think I can't even remember another film where actually a whole trailer was used to store a bug on set. That is pretty crazy.
I figured they used the whole trailer because nobody else wanted roaches crawling over them. Like, I'd be afraid to step foot in that trailer. One roach on the floor in front of me, I'm jumping. I'm sorry.
It's
like
too much. No, I'm not ready.
Yeah, no thank you.
Yeah, that is funny though. So that wraps it up for our basic notes of the franchise as a whole. We're gonna go ahead and get into the individual films themselves and start talking about those. So Creepshow 1982, directed by George A. Romero, and this has 5 stories in this one. You have The Crate, Something to Tide You Over, The Lonesome Death of Jordy Verrill, Father's Day, and They're Creeping Up on You. So 5 very different segments. I'm going to talk about a little bit of these facts first for each different film before we go ahead and dig into the segments. So first thing we have here is, while he was all business in his scenes, Leslie Nielsen had a fart machine in his pocket during the shooting. He would let it go off during rehearsals, and just before George Romero would call action, Ted Danson and the crew would be cracking up with laughter. So
Again, my point exactly.
he's a true joker and old school comedian, very comedic kind of guy, even though he did play a lot of serious roles early in his career. The comedic elements shine through in the slapstick comedy with a lot of his later films, and this kind of just alludes to that, of his, sense of humor on the set and him just wanting to bring a smile to people's face. So very fun fact, and indeed, that Leslie Nielsen was rocking the fart machine on set.
He's like the grandpa you want.
Yeah, that you don't get.
Yeah.
Fucking thing sucks.
During Fan Expo Canada 2015, George Romero had said that the cockroaches were the most expensive part of the film, stating that the cockroaches were 50 cents a piece, cheap, and they used more than 250,000 of them, which came to a grand total of, drumroll please, $125K.
Good lord, that is a lot
on roaches alone, though.
That's a lot of money on some fucking roaches, though. $125,000. $125,000. So that's a lot of money.
On roaches.
Yeah, like
that. You can go outside and catch them, maybe. Go to
maybe. You can go outside and catch them, maybe.
Yeah.
You can go to some people's houses and catch them.
Yeah, that's even more disturbing.
So that's a super dope fact, and interesting that bugs ended up being the most expensive part of that film. That, to me, is pretty mind-blowing. During a break in filming, Stephen King took his son to a McDonald's, and as a joke, Joe King was made up with bruises, cuts, and scabs. The girl at the drive-thru called the police when she saw him.
Oh no.
Oh no, what the fuck is going on here?
When I read that, my thought process is I wonder how she felt when they told her it was makeup. Did she feel as salty as those fries over there?
Extra salt on those. Yeah, I can imagine that she probably felt pretty foolish, but I think that was the whole point for them, was to get somebody to freak out and do something like that, call the cops or have a wild reaction like that, and then they could just be like, oh, it's fucking a joke, it's a movie, whatever. Womp womp. But yeah, I thought that was awesome. That's definitely pretty damn funny.
The same crew that was used for the Creepshow was also used in Sleepaway Camp, which was released in 1983, according to Jonathan Tiersten, the actor who played Ricky.
That is wild. So, the same cast, the same crew that did a lot of the cinematography and lighting and audio and things like that for Sleepaway Camp was also used in Creepshow. So, and it makes sense, around the same time, 82, 83. And at the time, you got to remember, when these films were made, they don't realize, the inception of these films, they don't understand that a film is going to do well. When they release a film, they hope that it does well, but there is no inkling of how well a film will actually do until it is out.
premiere.
Yeah, exactly. So it's super cool that that same cast worked on another film. I mean, I love that about the 80s too, because you find that so often, different actors and directors and actresses and crew and all working across different films repeatedly over and over again through that era. So that's definitely a cool little factoid about Sleepaway Camp and Creepshow for those that are fans of either or both of those films like I am. So the only George Romero film to open up at number 1 at the weekend box office is indeed Creepshow. So yeah, so that's cool to me, and a little bit surprising almost, because I had thought previously that maybe one of the Night of the Living Dead, one of the Dead films, Night, Dawn, Day, one of those possibly had opened up at 1, especially with Night, thinking maybe that one did. But I remember its original inception was not as well as some of his later films, because it was one of his early works. So Creepshow kind of hit, I guess, at the right time. He'd already established himself, as a director. George Romero was very well known in '82. He was putting out quality films, and he'd already had a well buzz for him. He'd already put out Dawn of the Dead, Night of the Living Dead, a bunch of successful films, and then comes along Creepshow, and he's working with Stephen King, a legendary writer already at his time, and put together this piece. So yeah, obviously it did very well, and yeah, rightfully so. Great film.
At the end of the lonesome death of Jordy Verrill, on the signpost is the town of Portland, Maine. This is Stephen King's hometown, and if you paid attention, King is also the star of that segment, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, so this is something that King is infamous for. He does a lot of these little odes where he will basically shout out Maine or things from his hometown. He's done it with It, he's done it with this film, and he's done it with a bunch of other ones that he's worked on as well. Speaking of which, there's actually a sign leading to Castle Rock, Stephen King's trademark fictitious town that appears at the very end of the segment, The Lonesome Death of Jordy Verrill, among other signs. And Castle Rock and a lot of these other areas obviously have a very Maine feel if you check them out. The lighthouses and being on the water and the waterman type towns, they definitely had that very strong Maine influence, that New England influence. So I think it's very cool that he kind of writes from what he knows and where he lives and where he comes from as part of his repertoire of tools to make his writing kind of pull you in a little bit more, because he's more familiar obviously with where he's from than he is some made up spot that doesn't exist. You base it on where you're from and what you know, it comes off a lot better.
Yep. According to Tom Savini, when Fluffy, y'all know Fluffy, the little fluffy monster, when Fluffy breaks out of the crate, once it's dumped in the water, the remains of Billy, who is Adrienne Barbeau's character, were supposed to float out of the crate. This, however, was cut.
Yeah, now that's unfortunate to me, because I don't even vaguely remember even seeing deleted scenes of this or anything of that nature. I would like to see that if it does actually exist, or if it was shot. There is a chance that maybe it wasn't even shot. I am not sure of that detail, but I would like to see that if it does actually in fact still exist. So speaking of Tom Savini, on an episode of Livewire in 1980, he revealed that all the creatures of the film had nicknames, i.e. where Fluffy got his. So the creature in the crate was called Fluffy, and the name of the skeleton at the window in the beginning of the film was nicknamed Raoul. So the creeper was actually Raoul. Was
Raoul
the real
sounds
name.
like a creeper name.
Why has he got to be a creeper though? Raoul the creeper. It does sound like he's coming to creep on you a little bit, just a slight bit.
Lock your doors.
Lock your doors. Hide your wife. Hide your skeletons. They come in with a knife.
Oh, Lord.
But yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, according to George Romero, 10 minutes were cut from Creepshow as a part of the deal with Warner Brothers for distribution. That sucks.
Yeah, so fuck you, Warner Brothers, you fuckheads. You guys want to be a bunch of dicks and cut legendary Mr. Romero's film down 10 minutes, and you don't know a goddamn thing about art. No, it's serious though. You can't be, I get it. All film studios have a deadline and a quota that they have to fill for the length of films and the amount of gore and violence that are in them. And there's a lot of limitations to things that dictate the ratings and when things release. And I get that. I just think it sucks that a lot of classic films have possibly legendary scenes cut from them that we'll never even know about because they never make it. Thankfully, now we live in an era where you do get a lot of deleted scenes and featurettes and things like that that are included with these films. So thank God for that. But yeah, that is semi-depressing. Joe King, the son of Stephen King, is the boy featured in the beginning of the film, who's an avid reader and collector of the Creepshow comic books. So this was cool to me. I never knew this actually until I started studying and reading into it, but if you look at the kid, you can definitely fucking clearly see he is the offspring of Stephen King, as he looks just like his dad.
Yep.
But I thought that was super cool that they actually used his son in the film, and that was, a very, very cool kind of way to include his family in it. I know that George and Steve both did things like that, where they would use names of their wives and girlfriends and kids and family and streets they grew up on and shit like that in their films with each other, to kind of have that little link to real life, which I think is also very cool. So that wraps up about the factoids for Creepshow 1. I do want to dive a little bit briefly into each one of the segments of the film, because I do think it is important to talk about each one of these individually. We're going to start off with one of my favorites, which is The Crate, which has legendary Tom Holland involved and Adrienne Barbeau in this one. And she plays the drunk character Billy. Tom Holland plays the husband that is basically the abused and shit upon husband that gets destroyed by his wife regularly while she verbally abuses him. He comes to wit's end and ends up wanting to feed his fucking wife to Fluffy. So this one for me is one of my favorites. It has a great soundtrack to it. Obviously John Harrison composed the whole film, but the segment in this one has some of the greatest piano riffs in there of the whole soundtrack, without a doubt. I do love Tom Holland's character. I love all the characters in this one. His friend, the wife. I like Fluffy as a character. He's terrifying looking.
He's fluffy.
Yeah, he's fluffy as hell. It's just a really cool story and a really cool, segment for this film. Definitely one that I enjoy. The next one is going to be Something to Tide You Over. This one features Ted Danson and Leslie Nielsen, and this one is absolutely visceral. Nielsen is a complete psycho in this, and I love the lighting technique that is used in this and throughout the film. But this one really has some great lighting, and the fog use when they come back from the dead as the plant zombies, if you want to call them that, the seaweed zombies, is absolutely brilliant. I love the background effects they use when they show Leslie Nielsen. He's freaking out, and they talked about that when he's laughing in that scene and he's losing his shit. They actually said he was laughing because he was doing the fart machine and people were laughing at him, and it was making him laugh, and that's actually the cut that they used for that scene, which is great. But I thought that was very cool. So Something to Tide You Over is a great revenge segment, is basically what it is. A scorned lover seeking revenge for somebody that cheated with, his wife. So very cool story and great use of Leslie Nielsen as being a super villainous character in there. The third one is The Lonesome Death of Jordy Verrill, which stars the man himself, Stephen King, as Jordy Verrill, who plays this backwoods nincompoop that basically has a meteor fall in his backyard, and he tries to sell it and get money. It busts open and leaks this fucking meteor shit all over his hand, and from this point on we are following Jordy through the perils of touching this meteor and now being turned into a plant man zombie thing living creature. Which it's a very depressing tale. You feel bad for him. By the end of it, he ends up having to take his own life, and it's just like, man, it sucks. Like, it is a shitty thing for him, but very cool story and very interesting indeed. In fact, you can actually see, I believe in that scene, there is a sign. I think that's one of the ones where they have the scene where it shows the sign to Castle Rock is in that segment. Which it notes to more Stephen King's work and is another side reference to him, which also is very cool. The next segment is also one of my other favorites from that, which is Father's Day.
To all you fathers out there.
Adelia, where's my cake, you bitch? I love that. I love Nathan, the grandfather. He's such a piece of shit character. But like great, like that's obviously the intention. He's supposed to be a hateable character, and he definitely nails that without a doubt. And that's another cool thing that I don't think I mentioned this, but that ashtray that is used in the first segment, or the segment with Father's Day, the one that he gets knocked over the head with and killed, that ashtray shows up in every segment in the movie. And I read that and did not mention that in this show. I didn't have it in my notes, but I do want to mention it because I'm thinking about it now. That is a pretty cool little segue, that ashtray, yeah, it's used in every segment. And I even think it's used in the wraparound segment with Tom Atkins, who is super fucking boss, and I met him in real life. Very cool dude. Shoutouts to Mr. Atkins. But yeah, that I think it's even in that wraparound story with Tom Atkins in the beginning, but I know it's in all the regular segments. But Father's Day is basically the story of this older man that is killed kind of for insurance money and inheritance by his, I think it's his daughter or his niece. It's one of the two. Daughter. I think it is his daughter. But yeah, he is killed by a family member, and she is basically trying to inherit the money and the riches and to get rid of him, and she does so and disposes of him, and he comes back from the grave and slowly starts killing all the people that are there to get the inheritance, and presents her head in fantastic fashion as a birthday cake, which I thought was absolutely brilliant to do, and what a great twist, and just a memorable scene when they stumble upon the head on the plate and the candles in the head. It's brilliant. I love that scene, and it sticks with you 100%.
He straight fucking like Oprah's them. Like, you get nothing, you get nothing, you definitely get nothing.
Yeah, he definitely lays down the law and makes sure that nobody gets any of that inheritance money.
Look at me. I am the captain now.
I am the grandfather. But yeah, he definitely makes sure that nobody's getting any of that inheritance money. So yeah, Father's Day is absolutely amazing. The last segment is They're Creeping Up on You, which, if you're not a fan of roaches, this one will get you squirming and squeaming. This one is definitely disgusting with the bugs, and I love it. It's one of my favorites. You know, I think it's probably one of the weaker ones out of the movie, but it is one of the stronger ones out of the whole, in comparison to 3 and all. So it's a solid entry. It's just not my favorite out of the batch, but it is still a good one, and it's fun. And I think there is some great effects when they show the roaches coming out of the old man's mouth, and that scene is just absolutely fucking gross and disgusting. And the way that they made it look is just really good and solid, and I'm definitely a fan of the makeup in that one and the effects that they used in it. Tom Savini is an absolute genius and really brought the effects on this film to life, and did it with just one assistant, which is very impressive as well to note of that. So those are the 5 stories that are in there. You also have the wraparound story, like I said, with Tom Atkins, where the son basically gets the voodoo doll and fucking starts pinning the dad, and the dad ends up having a heart attack from the pins. Just very grimy, and what a film. What more can you say about the original Creepshow? This is an absolute classic, and probably the best entry of the 3 films, with 2 probably following up and then 3 being the last. But they are definitely great films, and Creepshow, the original from '82, is the creme de la creme of these films in this trilogy. So Creepshow from '82, that wraps that up. We're going to go ahead and get into the second one right now. So Creepshow 2, 1987, directed by Michael Gornick. This one has 3 segments plus a wraparound segment, so 4 technically. You have The Raft, Old Chief Woodenhead, and The Hitchhiker, plus the wraparound story with the animation. Very cool one. I grew up on this one, saw it a lot as a kid. The Hitchhiker story stood out to me the most, with the grimy, fucked up face, and just, thanks for the ride, lady.
Thanks for the ride, lady.
Yeah, I love that line, and just a lot of corny one-liners. And the soundtrack is fucking dope as well in this one. Absolutely amazing, just like the original. I'm not sure if it's John Harrison that returned again for the scoring. I don't think it is, but the scoring on this one was done very well as well. So, interesting factoids about Creepshow 2 before we actually get into the segments themselves. Actor Daniel Beer, who played Randy in the segment The Raft, almost died from hypothermia. The water was so cold his body had turned green. The crew wanted him to continue acting, but director Michael Gornick said if they get him to keep working, he'll walk off the set and never return. So they took him to the hospital, and he made a full recovery, completed the segment for The Raft.
I'm glad he finished it.
Yeah. We would have.
I think he was one of my favorite characters because The Raft is one of my favorite segments out of this one. So
yeah, The Raft is definitely up there for me. The Raft and Hitchhiker are kind of tied as my favorite too. Honestly, it's really hard for me to pick one that I prefer a little bit more over the other. But both of those segments are amazing, and that is wild that he not only dealt with it, came back, made the recovery, finished the film. You know what I mean? That's awesome that he did that, and I'm glad that he did because. Who knows, maybe that segment could have got scrapped, or maybe they would have refilled the actor with somebody different. It might not have been as cohesive.
That would have been pretty weird to be like two different actors in the same...
Yeah, I don't think they would have done that.
Yeah,
I think they would have recut the whole thing, but it might not have been as solid of a performance. Not saying that this guy was like given an Emmy-winning, performance, but, it's a solid story, and it was done well. So who knows, maybe if they used somebody else, maybe it wouldn't have done it as well. So... glad that they didn't switch and use somebody different for that.
Actor David Hellbrook appears in the segment Old Chief Woodenhead. His father, Hal Holbrook, starred in the original feature film Creepshow in 1982 as the segment The Crate.
Yes, so Tom Holbrook, I keep saying Tom Holbrook. Hal Holbrook, I said that earlier too, Tom. Hal Holbrook actually was... the main dude from the Harry. He was Harry from
The Crate.
The Crate, the main character. His son appears, like you said, as the Fatso character in Chief Woodenhead, the heavyset guy, the heavyset annoying one. Remember we talked about his annoying laugh? If you look him in the face, you could tell that it is definitely Holbrook's son. So that is pretty cool that Romero and King decided to... get him involved with it. I definitely do like the fact that they did that. Definitely cool nod of the hat to Mr. Holbrook as well. So, although the film consists of only 3 short stories and the wraparound animation story, there were, just like the original Creepshow, 5 stories written. One of these, The Cat from Hell, was later used in a similar anthology film, Tales from the Dark Side, the movie. Okay, so that's where I read it, which was released in 1990. And directed by the original Creepshow's composer, John Harrison. Now, I did not know that John Harrison directed that. That's very cool. The other story intended to be on Creepshow 2 was the Stephen King short story Pinfall, about a ghostly rival bowling team. Yeah, ghostly rival bowling teams. Now, that's a really interesting concept, and I kind of wondered how that could have turned out.
Could you imagine, dying and your enemy's dead already, but you guys come back and yo, fuck you, this ain't over yet, this will never be over,
the bowling game's going down. Yes, bruh,
let's finish this.
Yeah, I think that's really cool that they use rival bowling teams as ghost spirits, kind of doing a rivalry story there. I think that could have been interesting, but it always sounds so maybe that's why they didn't decide to use it, but I would have personally have liked to check that one out. I think it definitely could have been a whole lot of fun, without a doubt.
I don't know if you noticed, but I noticed it, so that makes me better than you. Just kidding. At the beginning of the final segment, The Hitchhiker, several of Stephen King's novels are visible on the headboard by the bed.
Yeah, so this is something that King and Romero are both notorious for. They both are always throwing nods to their previous films and books that they've written or directed, which I think is great. I don't see any reason to not promote what you've done. You can call it shameless promotion. I think it's just a tip of the hat to what you've achieved in your career, and I think that's awesome that they do that, and I am definitely a fan of that.
Why not show off your books? You wrote them. They everybody knows you from these books. So,
I'm Stephen King, damn it. No, I do like King and Romero. Both of them I think are absolutely legendary and epic what they've done for the horror community as a whole. King has given us some of the greatest stories that have been turned into film, and Romero has directed some of the greatest films in the genre. So both of those guys are absolutely legends in the horror genre without a doubt. We're not worthy. During the second segment, The Raft, Laverne is wearing a shirt from Horlicks University, the same university stenciled on the crate from the original Creepshow. So this is super cool. This is basically them giving another tip of the hat to the original Creepshow and showing a little bit of love there for one of my favorite segments from it, The Crate. So I think that is absolutely cool.
If you didn't know this, I didn't either. Stephen King wrote an outline for the movie, which George A. Romero then adapted into a screenplay. The second of the three segments, The Raft, is based on King's short story of the same name from 1982. The other two segments are original stories for the movie.
Yeah, so this is something we talked about in the original one as well. That the first film also pulled from original King stories. This one does the same thing. But there was also ones that were written for this that were legitimate, strictly to being written for this film. So I think it's cool that they did a twist of both. I think it could have been great either way if you would have done all King adaptations or all new King work or whatever, or mixing them, like they did. I think either way it was going to turn out great. And I do think that the second one is a great entry into the franchise, 100%. So makeup artist Ed French left the film amid the filming of The Raft after being snubbed by the director, who turned to Howard Berger for advice on how to fix the blob monster in the lake. Berger and Greg Nicotero finished the remaining effects in the film without French's help. Yeah, shit got tense. So if anybody's familiar with those artists, obviously Nicotero and Berger makeup were part of K&B, and obviously were some of the greatest, makeup artists of this generation. I'm not super familiar with French, but I'm assuming he obviously must be a quality artist as well. But I could honestly, relate to feeling undermined and somebody going behind your back and trying to get advice from somebody else on something that you might be skilled in and offered good advice on or did well yourself. So I can see both sides of it. It was unfortunate, I guess, that happened. But I guess it's a good thing that we had Nicotero and Berger working the effects, because obviously both of them are very solid in that department and have a legendary body of work as well. So that is definitely a plus for Creepshow 2, is to have such a great team working behind the scenes on their art department.
Coming back to what he just said, makeup artist Ed French was originally supposed to play the creep, but then when he left the project, Tom Savini stepped in to play the small prosthetic-laden role. Yeah,
because I guess they had to obviously find a replacement, and Savini being connected to the film, why not have Savini, come in and do that? So it was awesome to me that Savini ended up being him, and I did not know that until much later. I knew it previous to doing this show, but I didn't know it when I was a kid that was Savini playing the role. So when I got a little bit older and found that out, I always thought that was a super cool fact. By the time they began shooting, they were already 10 days behind due to unexpected rain in their Arizona locations. So this film went into production behind schedule right off the break. They were already behind by a full 10 days, which in the movie span time is quite a bit of time. A lot of times filming is done in anywhere from 90 to 200 days. It depends on the film, but a lot of time it's under a year. So losing 10 days can be a dramatic loss of time, especially in spots where the environment takes a major toll on when you can film and what times of the year you can film. So definitely lucky, I guess, that they ended up getting it all sorted out and were able to deliver on Creepshow 2, because it is one of my favorites So those are the factoids that we have for Creepshow 2. We're going to go ahead and dive just a little bit here into each one of the segments. The first one being the raft. This one stands out to me as one of my favorites. I know it's one of yours as well.
Yep.
The raft is a really cool story of these three kids. I think it's three kids, 3 or 4 teenagers that go and they're out having a good time, partying it up, smoking and drinking. They end up going to a little lake area to swim. They get out to this
It's like a little
this
dock.
yeah, like a dock, yeah, like a floating dock. They get out to the floating dock and I guess a raft. I guess they're out on, it's called the raft. I guess that's supposed to be considered a raft, you know what I mean? But it's more like a dock that they're on.
Yeah, the raft is the thing.
Really? Is that what they
'cause
consider
it's
the
a
raft?
rubber. Yeah.
Oh,
The
okay.
little thingy that devours everybody, that floats along the water, that's what they consider the raft, because when they touched it, they even mentioned in the movie that it feels like rubber.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point. I
Yeah.
never even, you know what? I feel dumb as shit for not knowing that now and not even thinking that, but hashtag learn something.
Boom.
So yeah, that's awesome. But yeah, that's one of my favorite segments. The raft is really good. There's really no notable actors or actresses in it that I can remember. I think the blonde guy, and if I remember correct, has been in quite a few things in the 80s, but his name eludes me right now. But the raft is definitely a fun one. And I love the ending of it too.
Oh my
I
gosh.
beat you!
Yeah.
Man, like that's such a fucked up ending. Like you think he's gonna get out, but no.
I sat there like, that's what you get for talking shit. You should have just walked away. But no, you had to stand there and do your little victory lap and shit.
Yeah,
that's
shit,
what you get.
Yeah, that shit was wild at the end. I really like that one though. So the raft is cool. The next one is Old Chief Woodenhead. This one is a really neat story of this older gentleman and his wife that basically have the only store left in this reservation type Indian town, Native American town, and they are friends with this guy that kind of needs their help financially, and they loan him food and things that they need to keep things running smooth at their homestead, provisions and whatnot. So they give them everything that they need, and they put it on the house on this IOU type thing, and they have this good relationship with this family, whatever. And so they show the developing of that, and then the kids, or excuse me, not the kid, I think it's like the nephew of the older Native American guy that is friends with our main character Benjamin, the owner. I know it's not Benjamin. I think Benjamin is actually the Native American. I'm butchering this story really bad. I apologize to everybody. My brain is flustered right now.
And I apologize in advance because I don't remember much of this specific story.
No, this one, I remember it vividly. It's just I'm doing a shitty job of explaining the story is all that is. But basically, this family is on good terms with this other family, although they owe them a lot of money. They know that it's for a good cause, a good family. They're helping them out, helping them get by. A relative of this family ends up robbing the store where they've been getting the help from this guy. And when they rob the store, there is this old chief that basically overwatches the store out front. This old wooden mannequin type thing, this statue.
It's like a totem.
Yeah, and it comes back to life because there is jewels and things that are stolen from this man. They basically did a pact with the family where they took these stones and jewelry and in terms of holding it for waiting on the money as a kind of like a sign of good faith. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And they give him these jewels, and the young man comes along and ends up robbing the store, shooting the wife, shooting the husband, taking the jewels, and escaping and fleeing town. And that's when old Chief Woodenhead comes out and starts causing havoc. And
not today.
Yeah, just straight scalping motherfuckers. Yeah. And it's brutal. It's a really grimy tale. I really like it. I still did a horrible job of explaining that. I'm sorry for butchering that so fucking bad. I don't know why I couldn't explain that better. I guess it's because I don't know the character names like I should. But even if I give you the character names, that doesn't explain shit to somebody who hasn't seen it. So that's why I was trying to explain it without doing that. Didn't do such a great job. Anyway, moving on. The third segment is probably my favorite, and this is the last one of the 3 on Creepshow 2, and this is the Hitchhiker segment. I don't think there's anybody of notable fame in this one. I think the main chick might have been in a few things, but I can't remember her name. I don't think it's... For some reason, I want to say Virginia Madsen, but I don't think it's her. Maybe, I could be right, but I think I'm wrong. Anyway, if it is, she was from Creepshow. Anyway, or not Creepshow, Candyman. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Anyway, back to that. The Hitchhiker. It is my favorite of the 3 stories. It is a super grimy tale with, an awesome character, this hitchhiker that just keeps coming back and will not die under any circumstances. And he is straight harassing and following this chick relentlessly. She runs him over and she checks for a second but just keeps rolling and then repeatedly sees this guy over and over again. And he's more and more fucked up each time because she keeps hitting him and running him over and just keeps seeing him.
See, it's like the first time, she didn't even mean to run him over. He was standing in the middle of the road. Then the other time, like, I understand because I would have keep, like, trying to kill that bastard too. Like, after that, yeah, it was like harassment. Like,
yeah.
The first time it was like straight accident, but yeah.
Yeah, then he's repeatedly coming back. But at this point, he's so mutated and fucked up, it's kind of just like, is it even him coming back? Is it in her head? Like, there's so many ways the story could go because he's obviously not alive. And by the end, he's just this mutated mass of blood that just takes her over in her garage. And it's just fucking wild at the end. Thanks for the ride, lady.
He looks like a big Play-Doh blob.
Yeah, he's fucking like sludge by the end of the segment. But, yeah, that wraps up the 3. And then you have the animated segment, which wraps around with the kid getting the Venus flytrap that ends up eating all his bullies, and it's all animated. That was a very cool story, and I thought that was a nice little wraparound. I do like the animated segments to it. I did mention also that the music in this one is very cool. The theme song to it with that organ and the high-pitched synths is just very awesome. Very Rick Wakeman-ish kind of feel. But, yeah, I really, really, really enjoyed this one. I think Creepshow 2 is a great successor and follow-up to this film. And I do appreciate it. I haven't really talked about the ratings. We never gave our ratings on the first 2. For Creepshow 1, I'm going to go like a 8.75 to a 9 out of 10. Because it's just absolutely phenomenal as far as the scoring, the lighting, the direction, the stories, the cameo appearances, the adaptations being pulled from EC. It's brilliant on every level. Creepshow 2, I'm going to give a strong 7.5 to 7.75. That one, it doesn't have as many stories. It's just 3 plus the wraparound, but I do really like the vibe to it. Once again, I think the animated intro and outro and the scoring to this one is also amazing. The lighting isn't really as strong in this one like it is in the beginning. I'm not a hater. I'm participating. I do enjoy it. It's just not as good as the original in my opinion, but it is a great entry into the trilogy. So we've talked about the first 2 in depth. We're going to go ahead and move along. We have one more that we're going to discuss, and that is the third one, which is Creepshow 3 from 2006, directed by Anna Clavell and James Doodleson.
Mr. Doodle.
Mr. Doodleson. Whoa! So this one has 5 segments, and that, sticks true to the original. This one dropped in 2006. The segments are Alice, the radio, Call Girl, the Professor's Wife, and the Haunted Dog. Before we get into the actual segments, we're going to go ahead and talk about some factoids from Creepshow 3. So, Creepshow 3, unlike the original Creepshow from 82 and Creepshow 2 from 87, has no involvement from either Stephen King or George A. Romero, the series creators.
Which is probably why everybody thinks it's the worst out of them all. Like,
And it honestly is the worst out of them all.
Yeah.
It is. It doesn't have the budget behind it. It doesn't have the darkness. It's more comedic. But it's fun. I will say it's fun. And I know a lot of people are going to be like, no, it's shit. It's fucking total garbage. It's whatever. I think it's fun. I enjoyed it. I know that, like I said, it's not a great film. And I'm not setting it out to be a great film. But I enjoyed it. I enjoyed watching it. And Yeah, I mean, what more can I say about it? I think it was definitely at least worth the watch. I do own it. I have it on DVD because it is part of a series, a franchise, and I always try to get every part of a franchise, even if I don't like or love the film that comes from it.
Yeah. I mean, you gotta have, like, you gotta give them a chance. Come on now.
Yeah, you do. You definitely do.
So, in the first segment, the audience hears beeping when Alice uses what looks to be a rotary phone. That is not a mistake. In actuality, there are phones designed to look like rotary phones when they actually have push buttons.
Yeah, so that's...
Sneaky.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I've never really seen those phones, but that is pretty dope. I know that they do a lot of things nowadays where they'll take something retro and put new age technology in it just to kind of have a little nostalgia effect. So that's pretty cool. And I did not know that either. Unlike the King Romero-helmed Creepshows, Creepshow 3 has CGI animation in place of traditional animation. Wah, wah, wah. So, yeah, this isn't really the old school animation that you get from the first two, where it's hand drawn. This is, computerized new age CGI. So, they kind of strayed away from that, and even a lot of the effects are CGI in it. A lot of people shit on the ending when it has the creeper's face and it shows the CGI on it. It isn't the greatest, honestly. It is a little rough, but I mean, if you can look beyond that, it's not a terrible film, but yeah, the CGI is pretty bad in it.
Well, other than, like, big budget movies, I want you to, like, name a movie where the CGI isn't, like, a little messy. Like,
yeah, there's very few that have consistently solid CGI throughout. I will say that. That's without a doubt. There is no debate on that.
According to one of the professors, Professor Dayton, his wedding invitations, the neighborhood in which all Creepshow 3's stories take place is called Creepyville. Yeah. Which sounds creepy.
No, it's pretty funny. If you notice, all the stories in this kind of take place together. It seems like they're all in the same town. The actual stories themselves, like all the characters kind of reoccur in other stories. So I think that's pretty awesome that they do have that going for it, because that's something the original two did, and it's something new that they brought that I thought was a cool concept.
And you mentioned that, like, the same town, like, this one wasn't, like, it was in the same town, but it was also in the same neighborhood. Like, these stories were, like,
few houses away. Yeah, everybody in the
everybody knew everybody.
Yeah, everybody in the stories were going back and forth and kind of knew each other. So I thought that was pretty cool for sure. So there's a young female character in the film named Dusty Rhodes, specifically the segment The Haunted Dog rather. Dusty Rhodes, albeit spelled differently, was the name of a professional wrestler. Oh, Dusty Rhodes!
I remember Dusty Rhodes.
Yeah, so that's pretty cool. Obviously, somebody that worked on the film was probably a wrestling fan and included a reference to Dusty Rhodes. I'm assuming that was probably the writer of the film, or the screenplay writer. Somebody involved with the writing of the film, definitely. Or even possibly the director. Somebody involved in that film, higher up, had input on that and was definitely a fan of wrestling to use that Dusty Rhodes name. So that was a pretty cool factoid.
Rest in peace, Mr. Rhodes.
Yes, indeed. Rest in peace.
So during the fourth story, The Professor's Wife, when Charles and John are wrapping up Kathy's body parts in the rug in the kitchen, there is blood all over the floor. You seen that? Mm-hmm. Okay, good. In the next shot, when they run into the garage, the blood is now gone and the floor is completely cleaned.
Yeah, so we've talked about this in the last episode. Yep. The continuity issues is something that seems to happen in a lot of different films. Creepshow 3 obviously is no different, with running into that continuity issue and seeing a blood-soaked floor go completely clean in a matter of seconds. So obviously not possible to happen. Another thing to take note, when the possessed radio unexpectedly starts playing a song when Jerry's in the shower, the sound of the running water stops and the bathroom door opens immediately. Jerry could not have possibly turned off the water, stepped out of the shower, opened the door, and in this tiny amount of time. Yeah. So it's physically impossible. So once again, that's something with continuity that's not necessarily something that's changing. It's just something that's physically impossible, that they understated the amount of time that would be needed to actually do something like that.
Definitely agreeing. In the fourth segment, or story, whatever, the professor's wife, as I mentioned before, when Charles and John are dismembering Kathy, the severed arm that John is holding is a very obvious prop. If you don't notice it, then something's wrong with you. As you see it bending like rubber throughout the scene.
Yeah, it definitely is obvious that the way he's holding it, there's 2 times where it's super obvious. Once when he has the arm, the way he bends it at the wrist, and another time when he has the leg, I think he does it at the ankle or the knee. One of the joints he bends it, and it's super obvious that it's rubber. But I think, honestly, the director of this, I think one of those comedic elements to it, I think there's a lot of comedy in this one in comparison to the others. It definitely has more of a comedic vibe to it, and I think that was probably done intentionally.
Yeah.
So back to the segments in this. There is 5 segments. We're going to start with the first one, which is called Alice.
Little baby Alice.
This one is kind of like Click with a horror vibe. The Adam Sandler flick.
Oh, yeah.
This kind of reminds me of a little bit like, basically he can control life, his family, or she can control her family and all with this remote that she has. And as she changes it and other people change it, her family ends up changing and the world around her changes. So it's an interesting concept as she changes and as things around her change. Every time she does this, it mutates her a little bit. And as time goes on, the more she does it, she slowly gets to the point where she's just this gelatinous, bulbous blob of just pus, just bleh, just nasty looking. And that's kind of the conclusion of it. When she finally gets back to her real family, she looks like that. So it's not really a great story. It's one of the cooler ones in this, to be honest, but the ones in this are they're meh, but it is one of the cooler looking ones effects wise. It's just nasty looking and an interesting concept, but the acting is pretty shoddy, and there's definitely some cornballness to it and obvious comedic elements to it as well. The next one is The Radio. This one is... It's been done before in a lot of different ways, but basically a guy is listening to the radio, and his radio has its own life, it seems, and starts talking to him and telling him what to do and helping him make money and live this lavish lifestyle, but then it starts asking him to do some crazy shit, and he doesn't want to do it, and blah, blah, blah. It basically wants him to kill people that get in his way and interfere, and it spirals out of control very quickly. This one is very kind of Tales from the Dark Side-ish. It kind of reminds me of that, where it's more of an electronics kind of horror type of vibe. It's an okay entry, not one of my favorite from this, but still a solid one indeed. The third one, Call Girl, is one that we both like.
I like this. Oh, goodness.
Okay, so this one's pretty cool. Like, you have this prostitute hooker, a killer that's a prostitute, basically an escort, and she ends up going to the wrong dude's house and finding out that this dude is a legit vampire and terrifying looking. The mouth and effects is the coolest thing about this, I think. It really makes it the standout film for me, and probably the image to most people that they remember about this one is the giant teeth / mouth that are on this character. It's creepy as hell looking, and it definitely stands out and makes the segment probably the coolest one in here to me.
And you obviously listened, so you heard him say that it was vampire. You would have never guessed that. We didn't even think it was a vampire until we read up on it.
Yeah.
Like, I thought it was like
just a monster or something.
Some beast or whatever.
Yeah, it doesn't put off a super vampire-y vibe, but I could see that now after, and it connects with the other stories where it kind of alludes to that a little bit more, but like I said, they all kind of connect, so it was a little bit strange, but the Call Girl is definitely one we liked. The next one, The Professor's Wife, this one was pretty fun. Basically, this professor has this couple students that comes to his house for a dinner, and he has his wife there, and his wife is very strange, much younger than he is. He's an old guy. The professor...
She has an accent.
Yeah, she has a strange accent and talks real funny, and they remember back when they were in class with him and he was teaching them, and they were like, oh, we remember back when he would make jokes about making the perfect woman, and they start to think that maybe he made this woman. And as more time goes on in the episode, they really start to really believe that, okay, she's not even real, like, he made this woman somehow, like, she's like some Frankenstein Frankenstein shit.
And they took that to the extreme.
Yes. So since they think she's fake, they take it upon themselves to find a on-off switch on her, quote unquote, or something of the similar nature, and they hack this bitch up hardcore. I'm talking straight desecrated pieces.
They're over there like, oh, it looks so
real.
real.
Yeah.
The blood is so real. And then they're like, oh.
Yeah, then they realize,
Well,
like, yeah, they end up finding proof that she's basically a mail-order bride. And the end of the episode is the professor, comes back and has to... he finds her head in the oven and has to rebuild her from scratch with a voodoo kit that he gets from this crazy homeless guy. And that is basically the conclusion of that one.
I think it's sad because the professor left for a good, 5 minutes of the segment or whatever. He went to go pick up their wedding cake.
Yeah.
And came back to a dead wife.
Yeah,
that's
damn.
really sad, yeah.
Damn! Farouk. So that brings us to the last episode, or last segment of the last film, which is The Haunted Dog. Now, this one is basically, it ties in with the Creep, because the Creep is the hot dog vendor in this episode. But basically, this dickhead of a dude, this yuppie type of guy, gets a hot dog and drops it and gives it to a homeless guy on the street. The guy eats it, chokes, dies, comes back as a ghost, and haunts the yuppie. That is the short and skinny of this one. It's super basic premise.
It's basically a revenge film.
Yeah, it's revenge, but it's super cheesy. It's pretty low budget. I do like the scenes where they're showing the doctor giving the prescriptions and shit. The main character, I did like that scene. That was probably the coolest, funnest thing about the episode or the segment.
Somebody came in for a broken arm and he prescribed him Viagra or something.
Yeah, marijuana,
Yep.
medical marijuana to one guy. So that was probably the funnest part of this segment. It's probably the weakest. That one and... I would say probably that one and the radio are probably the two weakest.
Yeah.
But I still enjoyed this one. I know that everybody hates it. I don't think it was great, and if I was going to throw a rating on this one, I'd probably honestly give it a 5 out of 10.
Same here, 5. I really, it was fun, but it's not as good as the other ones.
Yeah, it definitely doesn't live up to the original two. It's just not as well done, but I do like it. I think it is fun. I don't think it's the greatest film to revisit over and over again, but it's fun to watch every once in a blue moon. It's something different. It's a little low budget, but I can deal with that. I've seen definitely a lot worse. The acting in it is pretty shoddy, but you learn to get around that. When you watch a bunch of film, I mean, I've got to really see something that's a true fucking turd fest to really be turned off anymore. So yeah, Creepshow 3 is the last one, and that about wraps up our Vital Organs discussion. That is our main part of the show, but we are not done yet here. We have a lot more coming ahead, people. We got the Netflix best picks. We have Pick Your Poison, body count reviews, poll of the week, the results from last week's episode and poll, and, of course, our closing with the final chapter. So don't go nowhere. We'll be right back in just a second.
Alfred Sanders was a butler for celebrities. He served the rich. Now he serves the rich. To the poor. Coming this fall.
You're all gonna die.
A new face for villains.
Who's gonna stop me now? No one.
Watch one man's journey into madness. Pushed to the brink of insanity. Everything is on the line. This year, watch a butler turn into
You've been served.
the Cutler. What's new for you to view? Find out this week on Netflix Best Picks.
You heard the man. This is our Netflix best picks of the week. This week, it's a good one, I gotta say. Gerald's Game from 2017, directed by Mike Flanagan.
Flanagan!
It is on Netflix, obviously. Thinks it's based on a story by Stephen King. It had my skin crawl, and there was definitely some heart touch moments in there for myself, I gotta say. there definitely was emotion. I loved it. It had me on the edge of the seat. Just asked him. I yelled like every chance I got.
It was a good flick.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it myself. It's a great thriller. It's definitely a Stephen King vibe all the way, and just an excellent job of really instilling fear and desperation, isolation. And it kind of. It's because it's a relationship based film. It makes you look at your own relationship and question your own shit. Like it's very, very psychological.
Fucks with you.
Yeah,
Heavy.
it's definitely psychological, and it's interesting because if you remember last week we talked about Hush as our Netflix best picks, which is also directed by Mike Flanagan. So it's super cool to me that 2 weeks in a row, and that wasn't intentional at all. That was total accident. But yeah, this one is definitely recommended. I definitely like it. It's a great Stephen King adaptation, and it is on Netflix now. So make sure you stream that one up. I don't want to give away too much on it, but check it out. It is a thriller.
Promise you'll love it.
Yes, indeedy. So don't go nowhere. We're gonna be right back in just a second. We got a lot more ahead for you. So go get your nachos, your Doritos, your burritos, your Cheerios, anything with an O in it. I don't know.
Or not.
Oh,
Or
get
not.
one of those. We'll be right back in just a second. Secalano.
This one, that one, this one, that one, this or that, or 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 I gotta pick this better, I like that one, gotta pick one.
Pick your poison.
Okay, so for the Pick Your Poison this week, we have two classics here. We have Little Monsters from 1989, directed by Richard Greenberg, versus The Monster Squad from 1987, directed by Fred Decker, who also directed Night of the Creeps, which we'll be talking about later in the show. So, man, both of these films I grew up on, Little Monsters and Monster Squad, and I seen them a ton growing up, and this for me is nearly impossible to pick one or the other, just for the simple fact of how much they meant to me growing up, and still do. I own both of these on DVD. Little Monsters I was lucky enough to get recently through my good buddy David Koenig. Shouts out to Dave K, a fiend on film. Much respect for sending me a copy of that out, brother. And I have the Monster Squad 20th or 25th anniversary edition on DVD. So both of these are phenomenal films, and both of them highly enjoyable with comedic elements. Definitely geared towards children, both of them. Little Monsters to me is one of the coolest flicks to really show you the underworld of, the monster world for kids. You know what I mean? Under your bed and in your closet and that type of deal. It's really well done, and Howie Mandel as Maurice is just one of the funnest characters ever in a movie. And then you have the Monster Squad, which is just super amazing because it's basically the horror version of the Goonies. You know what I mean? And to me, that's always kind of been how I've described it, as the horror version of Goonies. And it's just a really well done film. And Little Monsters, in the same token, has just really memorable characters with Boy and Hunch, and I don't even think his name is Hunch. I can't remember why. I always call him Hunch because they always make fun of his hunch, but I can't remember the character's fucking name right now. But I love the villains in it, and I love the characters, and you've got Fred Savage in there, young as hell, and
Babyface.
Yeah, Baby Savage, Little Savage. And it's cool to see that. And then even the dad, his dad is the one that played Marv from Home Alone.
Oh,
You know what I mean? Yep. So that's a cool little tidbit of information. But both of these flicks for me have always been the epitome of childhood horror films growing up, and something to show your kids when you first get your kid into horror. Like, these are the perfect films to show them. I can't really give a one or the other to this one for me personally. I can't, because both of them I grew up with so much, and they both mean so much to me, and they're both so well done. I'm gonna drop this one as a straight draw for your Pick Your Poison. I'm gonna take a little shot of both of these because both of these are phenomenal for me. I cannot pick. These are very well done and just hold a really strong spot in my heart and my childhood. So I'm gonna have to go draw on this one. What are your thoughts?
If I had to pick one, it'll have to be Little Monsters. Like, my first time seeing it was recently, actually. Sorry, I'm a newbie. But it's like, it's fun. And, you know, something you can sit down with your kids and watch, or your friends, or whatever, and you're like, you still have fun. It's not too scary.
Yeah,
it's not too funny. Like, it's like
it's a good mix. It's definitely got more comedic elements than horror, but it still definitely has everything there in both of them to be straight horror films. And Monster Squad, especially with having Frankenstein, the Mummy, Dracula, Wolfman, Creature from the Black Lagoon. I mean, there's total nods to all the Universal monsters in that. And then in Little Monsters, you have the Hunchback character, and Maurice is a monster, and the boy, and there's all these really grimy monsters. And honestly, there's a lot of adult sex jokes in Little Monsters that you don't catch either as a kid, but you definitely do catch going back and noticing and things like that in those films. So that it's a little edgy too for its time, considering that it was made for a kid's film and does have things like that in there. But it always just had that cult following for me, and very grimy. So for me, it's a little bit of both. And for Naya, you are going with the Little Monsters.
Little Monsters.
That's awesome. Okay, so that wraps up Pick Your Poison. You heard it from us first. We are going to go ahead and get into our next segment. Don't go nowhere. Stay locked and loaded.
Stay.
Boom.
Please.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The bodies are starting to add up. Body count reviews.
All right, and we are back into our next segment. We are talking about the body count reviews. That's right. So we're going to go ahead and get into the first one here. That is going to be Frailty from 2001, directed by Bill Paxton. So Bill Paxton stars in this and also directs it. Not a lot of people know that he directed this. And I think, I'm not positive, but I think it was his directorial debut of film as well. So this film is amazing. I love the story and the premise in this. I still don't think it's been done or anything even close to it's been done. Basically, you have these two brothers that grow up with their dad in this family where the mother is passed away or she's separated. I can't remember which of the two, but the mother's not there. It's just the dad and his two sons, and he basically ends up losing his shit and telling his kids that he can see demons in people, and all he has to do is touch them and he can see all the evil they've done. And his kids have split views. The younger one believes it full-heartedly. The older one thinks that he's batshit insane. And it shows one of the brothers end up killing the father and how they cope with that and grow up with it, and all the twists that come in with it there in between, which is a boatload of them. Frailty is just a brilliant film. It really is. It's very well done. It's crafted in such a spectacular fashion, from the story to the minimalistic music to the brutality and the kills and the backstories of the people that get killed. It's just very well done. For me, it was a standout flick.
I definitely love this movie, and like, I don't say that much. I kind of do, but I kind of don't. But when I do, I mean it. Like, this movie, I've never seen it. Like, first time seeing it recently. Oh my God. It had me shaking, honestly. Because it was like, you could tell they were, like, the actors were definitely in their roles. Like, there weren't a time where it was, like, cheesy, or you could tell they weren't in it. But it was like, they were in it, their hearts. That little boy was believable, man. He broke my heart. I thought he was gonna be the one to not follow in his dad's footsteps, but
yeah, they definitely had a interesting scene with the older son getting ready to kill, and then it ended up being the younger son to come through. That definitely was a real curveball in the movie, and it's just, like I said, it's very well done, and there's really nothing about it that I dislike, honestly. I love the ending, I love the story, the plot twists. Very well done, very atmospheric, great story. Matthew McConaughey does a stellar performance. Paxton has a stellar performance. Great directing by Paxton as well. This one for me, I'm going to give a strong 8 to 8.25 out of 10. This one is really high up there for me because it's very serious and done very well and has a great story.
I'd have to give it a 9. Straight boom, because it was like very believable. Like I said, you knew everybody was just in there, like very believable.
Yeah, the acting in it was definitely superb. I don't think there was really a weak link in any of it, and I enjoyed all the flashback scenes when they showed all the evils that the demons, quote unquote, had done in their past. I thought that was great.
I like how they, how it's all one continuous story. They break it up, but they keep bringing you back to what they started talking about in the first place.
Yeah,
liked it.
Yeah, their childhood and all. So the next film up we have here is going to be
Student Bodies, released in 1981, directed by Mickey Rose and Michael Ritchie.
Mickey Rose.
Oh my god, this guy.
So tell us about Student Bodies.
I believe I read something about it being the very first horror comedy or something like that.
Yeah, it definitely is one of the original of that time. I believe Young Frankenstein might have been out around then or even before, but it was one of the first slasher horror comedies, definitely, if not the first, that really poked fun at the way that it did, was so satire and slapstick comical.
There's definitely characters in there that you like. There's definitely some in there that you hate. You want to chop them in their throats. There's definitely creepy characters in there. Malvert
is a real character.
Yeah.
This guy has, I don't know, I think I read somewhere that he had some type of disease that made him very gangly and lanky and his bone structure very narrow, but he had a very strange body frame and just utilized that to the fullest extent in the movie, and they made little jokes with the way he would move and carry himself. And I believe it was also a reference to another horror film where they had a character like that. I think they were just accentuating that and kind of poking fun at it. Yeah. But Student Bodies is another one that's really a lot of fun. I'm going to go ahead and throw a rating on this one for me. I think The Breather, how high?
The Breather was the creepiest part of the movie.
I'm The Breather. The Breather is going to go ahead and give this a solid 6.5 out of 10. The 6.75 out of 10, just because I do think it is very original in its premise, and it is fun, and it's super slapstick and corny, but I grew up on it, and I do enjoy it, and that's why I couldn't give it a crazy high rating, just because I grew up on it, but I do think it is good enough to warrant that 6.75-ish, so it is a fun flick for sure, Student Bodies. What do you got a rating on that one for?
If I had to rate it, 7. I definitely enjoyed this movie. There were a lot of times where I cracked up and I couldn't breathe. Then there was times where it was just like, what the fuck does that even mean? Yeah, it's really good. I recommend it. I definitely recommend it to everyone who's a horror-com fan or whatever. If you're not, still check it out. Just do it.
Yeah, it is definitely worth watching if you haven't seen it. It is an enjoyable watch for sure, and definitely a fun flick. Moving on, we have The Cabin in the Woods. This is from 2012, directed by Drew Goddard. This one's really interesting for the fact that it also has a very original premise that I had never seen done before, and it also pokes fun at the genre, and almost it can be taken as a satire piece. But I do like The Cabin in the Woods. I own it on DVD, and I had the lenticular cover, which is super dope. But I think it's just a fun film. I think it doesn't take itself too serious. It pokes fun at the genre. It has cool monsters, cool kills, interesting original story. I do like this one. I do like the idea of having this company of rich motherfuckers just betting on people's survival. You know what I mean? It's very reminiscent of Hostel almost, where they're bidding to kill people. So very cool concept and an original spin on things. I definitely enjoyed this one.
It was more so they bet on who survived, because basically the characters picked how they died.
Yeah, by who would kill him. Yeah, which ones would kill, which victims, which monster they would fall victim to, rather.
They definitely had some like tie-ins with other movies, if you've seen it. But,
there was a lot of references to The Evil Dead, Hellraiser, just American Werewolf in London. There's a ton of references in that film and nods to different horror movies, which I absolutely loved. And I do like the two main characters that work for the facility in the beginning as well. Not familiar with the names of the guys, but awesome characters, and I've seen them in a ton of other things and definitely enjoy them in their acting. So the next one is going to be...
The Prowler, released in 1981, directed by Joseph Zito.
Oh, Mr. Zito, which I believe Zito was also the director for, I want to say, Friday the 13th Part 4? I can't remember if it was 4. I'm pretty sure he was involved with one of the Friday the 13th directing, but... Joseph Zito is a solid director. Prowler is a great film. You've got effects in here by Tom Savini himself, the legend. Fun storyline, great slasher of the 80s. You've got this really, really, really great character that has this sick fucking war-style blade that is just releasing havoc on people. I really love The Prowler. It's right up there for me with My Bloody Valentine and things of that nature, slashers of that era, Sleepaway Camp, The Burning. It's right up there with them. It's definitely a top flick. And it's from the early days of slashers. The kills in it are phenomenal. Savini's gone on record to say that this is actually some of his best, if not his best, kills and work in doing movie makeup. So you can definitely bank on the fact that there's some solid kills and solid makeup work in this film, and it definitely does wonders. So The Prowler is phenomenal to me. If I'm going to throw a rating on that one, I'm going to give it a 7.75 to 8. A very strong 8 though. Probably closer to an 8 than 7.75. I'm going to say a strong 8, actually, now that I think about it, because the effects are really good and it does stand out. It's very, very fucking just visceral, violent kills, and I love that. I love the shower scene is super grimy, and, you know, when he's, like, still alive at the end and, like, reaching out, it's just so fucked up. So, definitely one that I like there. The Prowler is definitely a solid flick. I'm going to give that one a strong 8. What about you?
I'm going to give it another 7. I mentioned last episode that I like when movies make your mind work, how like you guess, you have to figure things out on your own, like movies like that.
Cerebral.
This is definitely one of those movies that had me trying to pick out who the killer was by personality, by things they did, things they said, how they interacted. And it definitely related to other characters, but then it's like, oh, it was neither one of those people.
Yeah. It definitely keeps you guessing.
Yeah.
The next one we're going to talk about here is going to be Zombie from 1979. Now, this is directed by Lucio Fulci, and this is the first movie you saw from Lucio Fulci. Now, I had seen a few Fulci films previously, but this is the first time in a long time that I'd revisited Zombie, which we watched on Blu-ray, which was phenomenal. And it has the infamous eye gouging scene through the door with the wood, which is super grimy, and the infamous, maggot eye zombie rising from the dead. This one, for me, has great effects, and also has been loosely called a sequel to Dawn of the Dead, because Argento and Romero having that relationship, and there was discussions of shared soundtracks and a lot of other similar things between those two films. You also had that infamous scene with the shark underwater in the zombie, which is one of the coolest scenes in horror cinema, period, and definitely in zombie films, and that's definitely a standout in the movie Zombie.
The undead versus the great white. Yeah,
it's very cool. It's a cool concept, and the scoring and music in there from Goblin is absolutely amazing as well. Great soundtrack in that film. Just really well put together, and Fulci, definitely just nails that one home. I just realized earlier I said Argento.
Yeah.
And Argento did not do Zombie. Argento did Suspiria, yes. Fulci did Zombie, so let me correct myself from that mistake earlier. So yeah, Zombie for me is an ultimate classic. I'm gonna have to rate that. I'm gonna give that a solid. I'm gonna go 7 to 7.25. I do enjoy it, but probably not as much as I do some of the Argento stuff. I'm probably more of an Argento fan, but Lucio is great, and this is a solid film. I'm gonna go ahead and give that 7.25.
I give it a 6 or 7. My first Lucio Fulci film, as he said, it really was good. But I do think I lean more towards Dario Argento because I did enjoy Suspiria like a lot. So
yeah, I mean, I'm not trying to compare really and take it to
yeah.
that between these two, but I do prefer Argento over Fulci from what I've seen. But I haven't given enough of his body of work a chance yet, so I do need to dig into it more. But Zombie is definitely a good flick. The next one we have here is
Night of the Creeps, released in 1986, directed by Fred Decker, as we mentioned before.
yes, who also directed The Monster Squad. Now this is another dope flick by Fred Decker. I really do like this one. I like the concept of it. I was lucky enough to meet Tom Atkins a while back and have him sign my copy, and he signed it "Thrill Me," which is one of the famous taglines of Tom Atkins, who plays a detective in the film. But I love the story, and it always reminded me as an early version of Slither, you know what I mean? Because this came out well before Slither. It seems like Slither got their idea from this, and I've always compared and equated the two. Possible pick your poison in the future, i.e. hashtag. But I always thought it was very cool, and I definitely enjoyed this one. I think that Night of the Creeps is a great film with a great premise. I love the zombies with the maggot bug slimes, you know, slimies in their fucking head and scattering out. And I love that, you know, the ending with the escaped one and just how they finished it off. The film was just really fun. Night of the Creeps for me is a great one. I definitely enjoy it. It's one of my favorite, you know, pastimes to check that one out every Halloween. It's kind of something that I've always leaned towards. It has a very Halloween type vibe to it. For me, it really rings true to what I want to see in a horror film, so it's kind of been a tradition for me to every Halloween check that out since I've had it. But yeah, Night of the Creeps, if I'm going to throw a rating on that one, I'm going to go ahead and give that a 7.75. Yeah, 7.75. Let me restate it. 7.50. Yeah, 7.5 to 7.75. It's a solid watch. It's definitely a good flick. I recommend you to have it in your collection if you are a collector. If you don't have it yet, it's definitely a fun film. Atkins is just fucking awesome in it. Thrill me.
Yeah, I definitely love Tom Atkins' character. He, like, I wish I could, like, call him up and, like, hear it for myself. Thrill me. Yeah.
Yeah,
like,
it's just a really cool little fun tagline, and I love that he ends up playing a lot of detectives and those type of characters, and he does it so well. Like, maybe he gets typecasted for that shit, but he does do it well, and it is enjoyable. So, Night of the Creeps, definitely enjoyable for me. What's your rating on that one?
6. Solid 6.
Solid 6.
Yes.
Solid on the 6-0. Okay, so we have one more here, and that is going to be Mother's Day from 1980, directed by Charles Kaufman, who is Lloyd Kaufman's brother from Troma, who we both also met Lloyd Kaufman at the last Monster Mania 37, which was very fucking cool. Very cool guy. Signed a bunch of our flicks, took pictures. Unfortunately, I didn't have Mother's Day on me. Would have loved to get that signed by him. Even though he didn't direct it, it came out through his company, Troma. But this one was fun for me, and there is a remake of this. You haven't seen the remake. I have. It's a lot different. It's still kind of the same premise, but it's super updated and modern, so it's a lot more modernized and quite a bit different from the original, just because it's a 35-40 year difference. The remake, I believe, came out in 2008 era, somewhere around there. But Mother's Day is a really good one, highly enjoyable. Brutal story. There's really not a lot of killing going on in this one. I do love the training montage with the kids. I love the relationship with the mother and the kids. I love Queenie. You know, just really, really grimy. The story is pretty fun, and it's interesting to see the character that ends up rising up at the end being the one that does, because it's the one you least expect it. genuinely least expect it, and the character that you think is going to survive doesn't. It's a great twister, and it has a lot of fun plots to it. Little stories going on, like with having Queenie, and then telling the backstory of them in college, and then the story of the kids, and you kind of get a lot of different stories going on there, and I enjoy that. I think it was very well done. It's one of the few films that Charles Kaufman ever directed. He doesn't have a huge career of directing, and apparently he owns a restaurant now out in California, which you see in the beginning. They talk about that, and they have that little gag reel with him cutting his hand off in the beginning, which is really fun. But what are your thoughts and rating on Mother's Day?
Mother's Day is not what I expected. And for me, that's a good thing, because if I expect a movie to be a certain way, I'm not going to enjoy it. But I thought Mother's Day was going to be like, oh, happy Mother's Day, Mom, we love you. It's supposed to be like that. Instead, it's just like, no, we're going to do everything I say. This is how we're going to do it, and you're going to do it. If not, you get punished. It's like, oh my God.
Yeah, the mother in that is...
She's ridiculous.
Yeah, she's super strict with her kids, and she's training them to fight and to kill and rape and murder and be savage. And, she oversees their training, and... she's just super psycho and totally psychotic, and you see this from the very beginning when she chokes out the couple that tries to attack her, and she's choking out the woman. I mean, it's just super grimy, and that scene is great too with the kill. That opening scene is one of the fucking grimiest openings to a movie without a doubt. Is that the shotgun scene and just blowing the head off, and then the strangulation on front of the car, just super grimy. But Mother's Day is a real fun one for me, and I definitely enjoy it. Did you give a rating on that one? No,
my rating for that one would be an 8. I really did enjoy that movie.
Solid.
Yep.
Yeah, it is a good flick. I definitely enjoy this one, and I will continue to enjoy it year after year, and I will have to show you the remake sometime so you can get schooled in that, even though I do not like the remake that much. It is at least worth a watch. So that about wraps up our body count reviews for this week. I hope you enjoyed our thoughts on these various films. We are going to keep it moving and get into our next segment. Don't go nowhere. Stick around. We got a few more things coming your way. You are tuned into Horror Headquarters.
Wake up, kiddies. There's no time to sleep.
It's time for the poll of the week.
Okay, we are back for the last time of the evening, and we have our poll of the week. Before we get into the poll, we're going to talk about our results from last week, which is episode 1, which we did on the Reanimator Trilogy. Check that out on our YouTube if you haven't already. So the question from last week was, what is your favorite installment of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre franchise? So our votes look something like this. We had number 1, 7 votes came in for Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. At number 2, we had 4 votes coming in for Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3, Leatherface. Tied for number 3, we had 3 votes for the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre and 3 votes for the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 4, The Next Generation, one of my favorites and one of the most hated of the franchise. And then at number 4, we had 1 vote coming in for Texas Chainsaw Massacre The Beginning, and then a 3-way tie for 0 votes for the Texas Chainsaw Massacre Remake, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3D, and the newly released Leatherface, which we still have yet to see.
And we assume that there's no votes because you guys haven't seen it. I mean, if you guys are just being assholes, then...
You assholes! But, yeah, so we haven't seen the new Leatherface. I'm surprised the remake got no votes. Not a single vote for the remake. That surprised me a little bit, and I'm surprised that TCM4 got as many votes as it did. I enjoy it, but I know it's universally hated, so I'm surprised to see it actually perform that well. But those are the results for last week's poll, so your big winner is going to be Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 with a whopping 7 votes. And that is the conclusion of last week's poll results.
Now, for this week's poll of the week, which era had the best horror films? A. 1960 through 1979, or B. 1980 through 1999.
Now, both of these eras are packed with great horror films, and for different reasons. I'm not going to say what my personal vote is, but I will participate in the poll. So I'm going to leave it at that. But make sure that you guys get involved with this. You do want to get in on our poll. So go on our Facebook page, Horror Headquarters. The Horror Headquarters is what it is. Although the group is called Horror Headquarters. Somebody already had that shit. So I had to change the name of the group. Because some motherfucker has my shit. Fuckers. But it's all good. So make sure you guys get involved with the poll of the week. You know the question, she stated it. So make sure that you do drop your vote. We will put that up, and the poll will be up for a full week. By the time you hear this, it will already be up in the group, so just keep your eyes peeled for it. That about wraps up the poll results and the poll of the week for this week, and that brings us to the end of the show. We've talked to you about everything we had lined up, so this is the final chapter.
Dun dun dun.
Dun dun dun. So, once again, we thank you for tuning in and listening to us talking about our bone-breaking news for the week, the vital organs discussion, Netflix best picks, our pick your poison, our body count reviews, and our poll of the week with the results from last week as well. And we hope to have you come in next week, where we already have something decided for next week's show. We're not going to reveal it just yet, but we already know what we're doing. I will say it is another trilogy, which we had a lot of fun reviewing this one and watching this one. We will give you a little heads up on what it is as it gets closer. So make sure you tune in next week for episode 3 of Horror Headquarters. Signing out, this has been your host, Klive Kraven, with my lovely co-host.
It's been Naya, guys.
And we are out of here. Make sure you tune in next week for another dose of Horror Headquarters. We are just dying to talk horror.